What is up, everybody? Rajay back in the house. I know it's been a while. It's been a good amount of time, a good while, because as you know, we did the move, the relocation thing. So I am back in Cincinnati, which is a good thing as well for all the breweries and stuff here that you guys always see me go to in the past. 3-year stint in Baltimore, coming back here, a lot of good stuff planned. But tonight, it's going to be something a little bit more special. So I'm going to bring on actually Chris Tunstall, who is actually part of a bar above. And we're not going to just talk beer. We're going to talk beer cocktails. That being said, Chris, welcome to the live stream, my friend. Great to have you on board, and happy holiday season to you. You just got through Thanksgiving. We're about to go into Christmas, so a lot of good stuff happening. Seems like a great time to have a beer cocktail.
I'm telling you, man, always time to have a good beer cocktail. And I'll be honest with you, I think this might upset some of your audience, but hopefully I'm here to kind of do it justice.
I think the audience will be pleased for sure. So for those of you watching, Chris is the co-founder and chief of brand and product development with the Bar Above. So we'll talk about the website and things they're doing here in a little bit. There at the top of the comment section, you can actually check out all the Bar Above social media. Got the Facebook in there. I've got the YouTube, and I've got the Instagram. So a lot of good stuff there for sure. And then the website, we'll get into that here in a little bit. I've got that queued up that we can talk about and get into. But great to have you in. Now, you were the former host covering the topic of beer cocktails. So are you not hosting anymore, like on the YouTube channel, or you kind of just pop in from time to time?
So it's kind of a long story. So I did a podcast for about 8 years, and I was a bartender for about 15 years even before that, really primarily in craft cocktails. So we had a podcast where we covered a ton of different subjects. One of the things that we covered, we did a couple different episodes on beer cocktails. So I brought in some experts to give me a couple of different perspectives on how this can be utilized as a primary ingredient for flavor in cocktails. And they had some really, really great advice. So we had a couple different episodes talking specifically about beer cocktails.
Okay, excellent. And 15 years, you've been kind of doing the bartending type thing and got into the cocktail stuff, which I got to say, the bartending does play close to the heart. Because back in the day, I mean, I'm not saying I was anything like you, like working in your magic back there, but I had my little run in the '90s when I was a bartender, and it was a little fun time back then. I mean,
it's fun, man. It's a great time.
People hear the '90s and they think, "Oh, you made a lot of Long Island iced teas." Well, there was other stuff we did too. Long Island iced teas were popular, so were some of the whiskey sours and things like that. But there were some fun drinks you got to do, but the beer aspect of it is something that came along, I feel like, a little bit later. A lot of times when people think of a beer drink, most of the time it's either a car bomb, a sake bomb, or something like that. Or you're thinking of like the black and tans, you're kind of doing some stuff like there with the Guinnesses. But there was a stint where there was a point of time heading more 5 to 10 years before COVID, because COVID is how we mark things now. It used to be BC and AD, now it's COVID. So
right, it's so true.
Yeah, before COVID hit, where you would see on a lot of menus beer cocktails. Kind of curious now, what are you seeing out there in the industry? Because it seems like you don't see them as much. Occasionally, you'll pop into something, they'll have something where they'll use a beer in something. But do you see the beer cocktail game changing at this point, or are you still seeing good stuff?
I think it's kind of like the beer industry in general, like with cocktails. You go through these waves of things that are super popular and kind of getting a lot of attention on kind of a local and a domestic and a whole national level. So, like, for example, we had a little conversation about West Coast IPAs. They're fond of, got a nice spot in my heart. But I remember when that was it. That was all there was for a certain amount of time, right? It was blowing up. Same thing with hazies and stuff. So I think kind of like with a beer, kind of the fads that go through it, that's kind of a fad that we went through in the world of cocktails, where we really try to push boundaries as much as we possibly can with flavors and ingredients that we're pulling in. And beer happened to be one of them, to your point, for about 5 years right before COVID. And I think people were just looking for something new to try, and beer happened to be kind of the big fad at the time. So now we're not really seeing a lot because it does take a lot of dedication. There's a high product cost associated with adding beer into cocktails. So I think it was one of the things we explored, and I think it's part of our tool chest of ingredients to pull from. And I think we know a lot more about it now. But I think as far as the popularity of it, I think it's definitely kind of gone downhill over the last since COVID.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like yesterday. You just don't see it as much as being out there as, it was kind of building up. But it's also something I think some patrons may not be as used to. So when you're actually doing kind of the beer cocktails, what are some of the I'm getting tangled up in my damn thing here. Gotta go cordless at some point, right? I'm getting there, folks. Right? I'm getting there. What are some of the things you find out, like when you're approaching people or people in the bar, they're like, a beer cocktail? Is it kind of like they're kind of into it, they don't antsy about it, they don't know really what to do with it? It's kind of like they're unexpected. Like, what's going on with that?
Kind of. I mean, just like anything, it starts a conversation, right? So if they see something on there and they're like, I don't know what that is, or I have no idea how they're doing this, it gives us an opportunity to kind of tell the story of the cocktail, of what we're trying to do and the things we're trying to achieve. So it definitely is one of those things of like record scratch moment. You don't see this normally. Hold on, let's talk about the porter that's now in my whiskey sour. Like, I don't get that. So it definitely has that moment of kind of connecting with a guest, telling a story, and giving the whole reason why we're doing what we're doing. And once they try it, they usually fall in love with it. And like, that's a really cool way of adding additional flavor in there and complexity. I never would have thought about that. And that's kind of our role and our job, is to provide some novel experiences with cocktails through these different ingredients. So it is a really cool opportunity to have these kind of conversations to really highlight some of the experimenting you're doing with your cocktail program.
Yeah, I could definitely see it being eye-opening for some as they get into it. And speaking of the IPA earlier, I'm actually going to crack one open. I don't know if you have one there. If you want to crack one open, feel free. We are drink as you got.
I did my research. I've brought a couple here, so I'm ready.
So what I'm going to actually crack open is one from one of the local ones here in Cincinnati. And this is the one I used to have years ago down here. So I was glad when I came back it was available. It is their Sabertooth Tiger from Brian Geist Brewery. It is an Imperial India Pale Ale. Comes in at 8.5% ABV. So since I'm drinking this, that's session else for us around here, Chris. That's
that's a big boy, man.
We're just getting started. Come back on Thursday night when we're doing the 10s to the 15s. So something like an Imperial India Pale Ale. Like, what is one of the cocktails you would like maybe try to feature something like this in?
So when I think Imperial Pale Ale, I'm thinking big, I'm thinking bold, I'm thinking malty, I'm thinking all those hops in there. So when I start to think about that flavor profile, I'm going to start to think about whiskey, right? Because all that malt that's in that Imperial IPA, my brain says, okay, if it has that much malt, it's got to go whiskey. So then I think about, okay, how am I best going to preserve the integrity of this beer? That's beautiful, by the way. That was not the color I was expecting.
Yeah, nice cool. Carbonation action, everything.
Yeah, look at that. So my brain now automatically goes to whiskey. So I'm thinking, okay, I can probably like boil this thing down, really concentrate the flavors inside of that beer, like take out 50% of the water and really like make this a really powerful ingredient. And then from there, I have a couple options. I'm probably going to turn it into a syrup.
Okay.
So this is going to be my sweetening agent into a cocktail. So now that I have my syrup and I have my base beer that I can work with, now I can kind of plug it into whatever cocktail family makes sense based off of kind of what I'm trying to accomplish. So my brain immediately says old fashioned, right? You've got that barley, you've got that malt, you've got all that beer flavor that matches so well up with a whiskey that it just is kind of harmony. Then I'm going to add in my bitters in there and chill that thing down. And that's going to make a ridiculous cocktail right out of the gate. So that's kind of how I would think about it. The other thing I could do is like, maybe I want to take this a little bit different direction and go kind of that whiskey sour lane, right? I'm going to add a little bit of citrus to it. I'm going to keep it as a syrup and kind of go from there. Maybe add the egg white to add some more kind of complexity or kind of that layered effect into the cocktail as well. So once it's liquid, we have a lot of different ways we can use that tool. So, this is just a couple ways. We could use it as a float. We could use it as part of a foam. Like we could go a billion different directions with this thing, which is kind of the exciting part of kind of what we do.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah. Well, the Imperial India Pale Ale, being like that, because you do get that additional maltiness, it can get to a point where it gets a little blurred where you're not too much from a strong ale, right? So
Right.
the old fashioned idea is a great one, I think, because I know that it was a few years back and it was New Belgium that did their Oak Spire. When they first brought it out, they did it as an old fashioned and they used a
Oh,
strong
cool.
ale, which made perfect sense to kind of have that
Right.
in there. So you're not too far off of that for sure. So that would actually be a nice one to actually mess around with. So, like, for those that are like, what got you into the whole bartending thing? Like, what made you kind of head down that road? Because now you're at a point where you're enjoying it, you're loving it, you're sharing all these great things. But like, what was that? Was it just something you fell into, or something you were kind of directed you wanted to go into? Did you watch Love Boat and you saw Isaac and you're like, I can do some of that stuff? Like,
Kind of, honestly, like, so I kind of went down a kind of this roundabout way to get into bartending. So yeah, I saw Isaac on Love Boat. He was a charmer on that boat.
all the
but
Gen Zs are
also-
like, who is Isaac?
I know, right? But also like Tom Cruise, like in the movie Cocktail. Like,
Right.
I started like with Top Gun, and everybody wanted to be a pilot at that point, right?
Right.
So, and I did too. But then I realized how much hard work it was. I was like, screw that. I don't want to work that hard. So I did a lot of customer service jobs, found myself in Vegas, of all places.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a craps dealer out there. So for anybody that's played craps, it's a really, really exciting game. So that's the one with the dice, and you throw it down the table, and everybody goes nuts. And it's a really cool environment. So I did that for a couple of years, and I absolutely thrived in there. The noise, the chaos, the action. And the thing that was really interesting about that game is there is a system on top of that game. Mm-hmm. And as a dealer, you go through that system in order to make the game move efficiently. So that's the thing that was magical to me, is like, no matter how crazy this game got, no matter how busy it got, no matter how much money was on the table, you could rely on the system to get the job done. And that was cool. So I left Vegas and I went to Northern California, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I was going to school, and I went to school for virology and biology. And so my brain was all in science, but I always knew I wanted to kind of be an entrepreneur. So I got into tending bar as a way to kind of like replace the environment that I was in Vegas, that high-paced, exciting environment. And I thought about it. I'm like, well, I think bartending could fit that need. Going back to Tom Cruise, being one of my career inspirations, I'm like, well, cocktail, everybody loves the bartender, and Isaac from Love Boat.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, man, well, this sounds like fun. So that's kind of what I did. I went into a restaurant up in Napa where I was at the time, and walked in and didn't have any restaurant experience, and said, I have zero restaurant experience, but I know that I want to be a bartender, and I will scrub dishes for the next 6 months, but I want you to understand, in 6 months, I want to be a bartender. And she hired me. And then I became her lead bartender in 6 months. I worked as a waiter and then started working behind the bar, and I absolutely fell in love with it. Yeah. And this was early 2000s. So this is right when the craft cocktail movement was starting. And so I started paying attention to kind of the culinary techniques that were being applied at the time, which were cutting edge. Because if you attended a bar in the 90s, you remember everything came out of a gun or a sweet and sour bottle, right?
Right. The old white bottle with the color chip or whatever was in it. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So you didn't have a lot of flexibility. Like you were pouring, and the advice that I got when I first started tending bars, like, if you don't know the recipe, make it pink. And I was like, really? That's it? And they're like, yep, make it pink and send it. I was like, all right. So then I started paying attention to like the craft cocktail movement, and it just started. So there was 5 people on the West Coast in New York, and there were like 5 people in San Francisco, and they were all talking on a bulletin board, a website at the time. I think it was like Chowhound or something like that. So you could basically see who was doing what and where.
Right.
And so I'm like, I need to tap into this. So I did, and I started figuring out the techniques and all that. And that's kind of what got me into tending bar. Was that fascination with the movement, the fascination with learning culinary techniques and applying it to something that we haven't seen in 200 years. So it was really, really cool. And it really got me inspired to get in there and 15 years later, that was always kind of my main focus, was developing cocktails, running bar programs, and working at some of the craziest bars in San Francisco.
I've been to San Francisco. There are some crazy crazy bars there for sure.
Yep.
And now you're down in the southern part. So, like I said, we were talking a little bit before, but you do a lot of work with consulting and working with a lot of the bars and businesses and running some of the programs and operations. So, what's your take now that you're seeing on the crowd? I know there's a lot of things that'll come out talking about how the younger generation isn't drinking as much or whatever, or maybe they're drinking more spirits or more of the seltzers than what they are the beers. I know some of the younger generation I work with, they still drink. So I don't see all the ones that aren't saying they're not drinking as much. Now, I know we have other things that are available if you're in one of like 25 states. So that could be part of it too, right? So, but what are you seeing like there in the crowds and stuff? Do you see more of a shift? Do you feel like your clientele is kind of that Gen X up through Boomer? Maybe you got a millennial, or do you see like some of the Zs and younger or whatever coming in? Like, how's it break down for you? Are you seeing a lot of younger people still drinking, or?
Well, I'll be completely honest. So I did a long stint with consulting up in the Bay Area, and I handled a lot of different accounts, and that was before we moved down here. So the last time I did consulting was about 6 years ago. So I don't have my pulse on exactly what's happening right now in the industry, but I can kind of tell you from my end of what I'm seeing as far as trends in the industry, and as far as kind of the demographics that we're talking about as well, to kind of answer the point. One of the things I noticed, and you kind of touched upon this, is when you are in one of those 25 states that have legalized marijuana, it takes over some of the mental share of kind of your enjoyment, right? Because you can't really, I mean, you can, but you shouldn't dabble in both at the same time. So you have to choose one or the other. So I think a lot of that is coming from that generation and kind of that movement of legalized marijuana. Is something that when I was working inside of a spirits company, they were very aware of what was going to happen, and they were trying to plan around that kind of fall off in business as well. So it was a very, very big impact, and it continues to be a big impact. So we are seeing less people drinking because they are choosing other things to drink. The other thing that we're seeing from kind of a macro level is that people are kind of gravitating towards non-alcoholic now in a big way. So this was kind of a small thing that happened about 10 years ago, and it was only a handful of people really kind of focus on it and actually caring about it. And a lot of the time it was a joke. Like, why would I spend my money on something that's not going to get me hammered, that has no alcohol? But now I think it has gained such critical mass that it is a whole different movement that is kind of working as well alongside some of the other things we're talking about. So I think there's just a different shift in the mentality, and I think there's just a lot of different things pulling at that same kind of enjoyment kind of sphere, I guess, or influence. So, and there's, kind of like in the 60s and 70s, that pushback from what our parents used to do. So I think those kids are starting to come to age too.
Yeah.
And, they're like, yeah, maybe not drinking beer or drinking alcohol so much, and kind of pushing against that as well. So there's a bunch of different factors, but I think there's always going to be room for alcohol, and more specifically beer.
Yeah. Well, what family doesn't have a cousin Eddie, right? So
right. Don't mind me, just clean it up.
If you don't know who that is, that might be you. So but you mentioned a good thing there as well, because I did have one of the things I was going to ask about. So right now we have the whole non-alcoholic movement taking place, not only in beer. We also have non-alcoholic in spirits and even wines. Yep. So are you finding now that you're actually coming up with ideas for those drinkers that don't want the alcohol, that you're actually doing some mixing there? How's that maybe starting to show up for you?
Oh, 100%, man. And so we created a lot of courses. So we educate consumers, passionate consumers that are into the cocktail culture, as well as professional career bartenders that are kind of looking to elevate their career. And one of the things that we did was actually launch a mixology course, both for beginners and for advanced bartenders as well. So we have the Mixology 101, and I think we have the Mixology or Mocktail Masterclass.
Okay.
So we're really kind of showcasing how to use some of the non-alcoholic ingredients and creating really flavorful, delicious cocktails. And on the other side, on the professional side, we're introducing them to the ideas of how to come up with craft cocktails using some of these spirits, but also how to craft a non-alcoholic spirit in-house, because we're not limited anymore by alcohol percentages and taxation and, the ABC or TFA, whoever is the governing body. You can create your own non-alcoholic ingredients and have a huge impact on your bottom line. So that is another course that we teach of how to actually create your own rums and whiskeys and tequilas from scratch for your beverage program. So it is a big part of our education. And one of my favorite ways actually to use these products is not necessarily to omit alcohol, but to drop the ABV down.
Okay.
Right? So imagine, you have a Negroni, which is equal part gin, sweet vermouth, and Campari. All of them have alcohol. You remove maybe the gin or the sweet vermouth and replace it with something non-alcoholic. Now you can really start to target your alcohol levels. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of a cool tool that we have while still delivering flavor. So I remember I made a session margarita where I replaced basically 2/3 of the tequila with a non-alcoholic tequila, and just made like a 5-gallon bucket of it. And we went camping, and you could just sit there and drink it like a beer all day long. And it's amazing. It's so great. So there's a lot of different ways to utilize these. Like even in the beer side, you do a 50-50 with a non-alcoholic beer, you get all the flavor, you get half the alcohol content, right? Okay. So there's ways of incorporating these to still have what you want, but kind of stretch it out a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's actually a great idea there too. And got actually Disco with a question. Shout out to you, Disco. Actually overseas. So thanks for being up late tonight, my friend. He's over across the pond, as we say. Our craft beer cocktail is a thing I enjoy using beers as a cocktail base, particularly sours with the spirit and fruit juice or soda. Cheers. So yeah, here in the States, I mean, it is a thing. I know you just came in a little bit ago, but we were talking earlier. Before COVID, you saw things starting to emerge a little bit more. Then COVID kind of pushed it back, and I think that was just a change of times and restaurants not being able to fill them, and everybody go back and re-get their footing and stuff like that and everything. But yeah, I mean, it's funny when I think back. I think back to the one craft beer cocktail back in the day, and I think everybody was like, "What's it called?" I wouldn't say it begins with a B, but I can't remember the name of it now. But it's basically just whiskey and a beer.
Boilermakers.
Yeah, Boilermakers. Like that was the whole thing. I guess the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. They give me a Boilermaker, right, or whatever. It's basically a beer with a shot. But some people would drop the shot into the beer. Some would drink it after or sip it as they're drinking the beer. It's kind of like your own little thing, but it's much more advanced than that. It's kind of like the NA beers, like. It used to be St. Pauli's and Sharps, and now we got so many great ones that are out there, right? You don't have to taste cardboard anymore, which is great. So.
Or that nickel, that shiny nickel, taste, that flavor. Oh, it's awesome. But that's a really good question because sours are a really great way of using those beers, and like a framboise or a lambic or something like that. That sour profile makes a killer ingredient in a cocktail. And there's a lot of different ways you can use it. So like even adding like citric acid or malic acid, so that way you can have basically the same punch of acidity as a lemon or lime, but you have all that flavor from the lambic in there or a different beer in there. Like it is a really great way to utilize the ingredient in the cocktail.
Okay. Yeah, lambic and sour. I mean, I love some lambic. So that Lindemans, that's just like Kool-Aid right there to me. It's so good. I think too much of that. I expect Wilford Brimley to show up at a certain point. But for people that are watching or kind of learn, what are some easy ways for people that might want to start experimenting themselves? Are there recommendations you would have? Like, hey, go out and get a typical adjunct lager and then try to mix it with this or with that. Are there beginner steps people can try to matching up? Because we talk about food pairing, right? And you're trying to match up the right food with the right beer. You might do a IPA with a spicy food because that enhance both of them to give you a little bit more heat on the feel. But is there a starter set for people that might want to experiment with things, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would probably recommend just starting out with some standard beer cocktails that everybody kind of has either tried or are kind of out there in the world. Like, first of all, like a shandy is super good, super refreshing. And for anybody that doesn't know what that is, it's basically like a 50% lager and 50% lemonade. So you get this really light, refreshing drink that you can just toss back, especially like if it's hot outside and you're on like a river or you're fishing or something like that. They're absolutely wonderful. You can do that with grapefruit juice. So you can experiment with like a little bit of sweet, a little bit of acid in combination with a lager or a light style beer. Like even a Kolsch would be super good, or a Ghost or something like that. And really like a Ghost with a grapefruit juice, that salt in the grapefruit would be an absolute killer kind of style with a shandy. So that would be a really good one. You mentioned the Boilermaker. That's kind of a hard way to start, if I'm being honest. Like you're going to get real messed up real fast. It's like dropping an espresso in a cup of coffee. It's going to get you wrecked real quick. But I mean,
it's like,
I'm not going to lie.
What's the party? 15 minutes? Yeah, give me a couple real quick. I'll be good to go.
I'm telling you, like when you need to when your eye is on that prize, it's a great way to get going. An Irish whiskey, shot of lager or a beer, and you're off to the races, man.
Yeah.
But like a michelada, like even like Bloody Mary and a beer is phenomenal for hangovers. And it is super, super good. So start off with the standards. And if you feel like you want to kind of get into it more, then you can start to experiment with it and have a little bit more fun and start like boiling it down, condensing that flavor, turning it into a syrup, infusing herbs and spices into it. Like there's a lot of different levels that you can go depending on kind of your interest and skill.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest with you, like it's hard to beat just a nice cold beer.
It is. Well, it's funny because like one of the things here, and I always say, everybody knows the Watch channel. I don't know if it's just the one in particular or just all. I like a good rattler, but I have trouble with the shandy. More or less the Leinenkugel one. It's just like so sweet. It's like a point. So just give me a lemonade if you're going to give me this much sweetness, right? But I've had some from craft breweries that a little bit more different, not as heavy on the sweet, that actually have been done okay. So again, it's always about testing what's out there and finding what your palate likes the most, so to speak. And
I think this is kind of what I love about mixology, though. To your exact point, is like when you have control over your ingredients, you could dial it into however you want it. So your point about being sweet, like dial back that simple syrup a little bit or that sugar profile, and you can kind of really start to dial it into your taste. So now you know your beer, which is always going to be the same, right? That's the whole point of brewing, is making sure you have a consistent product. Then you can develop a recipe around that, so you can dial in that shandy, that rattler that you love, based off of that ingredient. So that's kind of the thing I love about it, is like that level of control you have versus like, going out and not knowing what you're going to get at the end of the day.
Sure. Well, let's go ahead and I want to pull up the website here real quick too. Now the website that I have up here, did it pull up? Let's go. I want to make that bigger. Give me 1 second. That doesn't really help me down there. I should have some music here.
So I got to ask you a question, man. Everybody I ever talked to about beer, especially people that are really interested in beer, they all have a beer story. They all have that one beer moment that started them off on a path. Do you have one?
Actually, I do.
Okay, so, I want to hear it, man.
Yeah, all right. So it was a cold night. No. No, it's funny. We were actually, I was at an event and it was for work. We were out. Let me go to get this real quick here. I'll pull this up. So we were out in the work event and it was at one of the local breweries. And I mentioned back in the 90s where I used to bartend. So I used to drink a lot more cocktails. And I was kind of like not really fun. I started getting a little more shift into the beer mode. Coming out of the mid to late 90s, we had some breweries, but they were a little earlier before the craft really took off, right? So we ended up being, and it was a rock bottom brewery in Cincinnati. And I was like, I want something different. I asked the bartender, like, I want something different. I don't want like the regular, like old beers, like what else we may have. And he was like, well, I think I got something you may like. This is something a little bit different. A lot of people seem pretty popular with. So they went ahead and gave me one of the Ithaca Flower Power IPAs.
Okay.
And so I ended up getting this beer and I poured it and I was like, okay, and tasted it. And when I tasted it, it was like a light bulb went off. And it was just like, what is this? And that kind of started leading me down that path. And it was just like, I can still remember as clear as it was, sitting on the patio that they had, out on the couch, getting that first sip. And it was just like, everything stops.
Yep.
And then it's like, okay, I'm going to hunt for more after that.
Yep.
Hungry like the wolf. Duran. There you go. Maybe hungry like the wolf. So, but it was such an amazing beer. And I actually went back and to even try it now, it's kind of got that classic type status. It's such a tasty one. I tell people, if you want to try like a traditional IPA, obviously we have the big ones out where you're at. We have Sierra Nevada and we have some other stuff, but like that Ithaca from up in the upper Northeast out of New York, people know that. And it's got that, It's got almost that same feel up there as Sierra Nevada does out west. And it's just like, cool. You mention it and it's just like, oh yeah. And everybody just remembers first time having it. But yeah. But what about you? Was there anything that kind of set you off to like go, whether it was the beer or the beer cocktail, or like, was it?
Yeah. So there was one moment where there was a couple of moments actually that kind of like really kind of sparked my interest. And like, I am a very culinary focused person. I love flavor just in general, no matter where it's coming from, food, wine, beer, cocktails. I love all of it. Mm-hmm. So I remember one of the first experiences I had that was a negative experience actually. That kind of put me off with IPAs is I think I was like 19 or 20 or something like that. And we were experimenting with beers. And I mean, up to this point, I was drinking a lot of Budweisers and like Coors Lights. So that's a good frame of reference. And we got this beer called Pete's Wicked Ale.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Yeah. And my palate just wasn't ready for that, man. And so we had this like game, me and my buddies, and whoever lost had to drink that beer. And unfortunately, I was the guy that lost. And so I had to drink this beer. And so I was like, oh, and so it has kind of a real negative kind of connotation because, like I said, my palate wasn't ready for that beer, but it just imprinted itself on me. But the first kind of good beer experience I had, besides kind of the standards that, I had up to that point, was I was running a beverage program up in Sonoma. And I had to kind of put it all together. And so I was tasting a lot of different beers and stuff like that. And there was two beers that stood out. I believe they were both from the same brewery, North Coast Brewing. And the first one was Scrimshaw Pilsner.
Oh, yeah. Scrimshaw is
solid beer.
Yeah.
And at the time, it was like, hold on, record scratch moment. What the hell is this? I need more of this. And I mean, ever since then, I mean, they've blown up. They're I think it's Thelonious, and they've got
Rasputin and
I mean,
41 or whatever. Yeah,
solid. I mean, they've got some good ones. But the other one that was from them as well was a kind of a light wheat beer called Lone Star, and it was so light, and it was so refreshing, and it was so different from anything else I've ever had. That I remember it was the same moment, like that same thing of like, hold on, what is this? And why have I never had this in my life before? And so that kind of set me off on that path as well. And then from there, it was like, Duvel. And then
now you're talking my language there.
Yeah. And then what was the other one? Chimay.
Yeah.
And I tasted my way through the entire lineup of Chimay. And then I started going on the Belgian kicks. And I worked right next to Russian River Brewery. So they're phenomenal when it comes to Belgians. So I kind of went through that whole lineup of Damnations and all that, like all of their stuff. And then Pliny got a hold of me. And then, but there were all these little moments that just kind of like solidified it for me. Firestone Union Jack IPA. That was a kind of a transformative beer for me because it was a different style from the West Coast IPAs. It was malty, it was dense, it had flavor, and then it had that kind of bitter backbone, and it was sensational. So yeah, there's been a Allagash, so many. And the first time I had a hazy, it blew my mind. And then after about 5 more, I'm like, I'm kind of over it.
That can definitely happen. Yeah, Firestone. That took me a while to get some Firestone because their distribution when you get out east is definitely scattered. And here in Ohio it was tough to find for a bit. When I was in Baltimore, my mother's in New Jersey, so I was in Baltimore. I was able to find some there. Then I went to New Jersey. I was able to find some there. It's just always funny how distribution is because one side of the country, the other side of the country, in the middle, not so much.
Right.
So,
Yep.
But I've been like that parabola, and I still got some of the old Firestone here. I haven't even cracked it open yet because it's like when I crack it open, it's gone. It's gone. And you're like, do I want to drink that right now? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I feel like I got to drink some of this stuff. I got so much beers here, but that's a whole different situation that you have. You can end up getting too much. But and looking like at the website, you got a lot of good stuff out here now with the Bar Above website. Is that more kind of sharing some of the tools to get people started if they wanted to take a look at doing their own mixology, or are you kind of doing some things on here too? I know you got the blog on here as well.
Yeah, so funny story. We actually started off the company as a media company. So our company was based off of sharing information around craft cocktails because kind of earlier we mentioned there was only 2 cities that were actually really exploring craft cocktails at the time, New York and San Francisco. So when I moved to San Francisco, I realized that it was kind of a weird scenario where nobody was communicating and sharing techniques because it was a very kind of vicious competition for craft cocktails at the time. So that was kind of where we stood is, okay, well, if you're not sharing information, nobody's going to learn about this and get better at their craft. So that's what we started. We started sharing techniques through our YouTube channel. So we started off fundamentally as an education and media company. And then a couple of years into it, people kept asking us, what do you recommend for bar tools? And at the time, we couldn't really recommend anybody because we wanted that Amazon affiliate money because we were broke because we were running our own company. But there just wasn't anything on there. Right, exactly. So then one day, my wife's like, well, I think we got to start making our own bar tools. What is your perfect shaker? And so then that's when we started doing bar tools. And primarily what we do now is we manufacture a lot of bar tools with my experience, and we have another bartender on staff as well. So all the insights we had from our industry to make bar tools better. So these are probably some of the best bar tools you can find in the world. And I would put a lot of money behind that, to say that. And so we do really great bar tools, extra durability, extra functionality, but we also support that with education. So we teach you how to use these tools. We teach you the fundamentals of cocktails. We hold your hand through that entire journey. So that way, if you are excited about education and learning about cocktails, we're going to be there your entire journey. So everything from beginner all the way to some of the most advanced things you can even consider when it comes to craft cocktails, we kind of fill that gap. And somebody recently said that they coined it the best is we're kind of the long-term relationship in your cocktail journey. We're going to be there the whole time.
Okay.
Where, other companies, you can buy their stuff and that's pretty much it. But we're going to be there to support you and educate you and show you what's possible along the entire ride.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Some of the stuff on Amazon, sometimes you get something, you go back and it's like, they're not there anymore. Oh, okay.
Right.
But it's kind of cool. Like this one here, like build a custom bar set that you can actually mess around with too, to kind of build your way out on things.
Yeah, and so like it really depends on where you are with your experience, your dedication, your love for the craft. You can start to build your own things, and I think you get a discount for all the pieces that you put in there. But like this one is a great kind of beginner course.
Of course, yeah,
to show you the basics of cocktails.
Yeah, so great way to learn how to become your own mixologist, so to speak, and the different things that are out here, the shaker. So definitely check out the site. You can see it scrolling across the bottom, but barabove.com will pull up the website there. And, we are a couple of weeks out from Christmas, just saying, folks. And if you are looking at stuff for possibly doing the dry January, you do have some stuff like mocktail mixology out here too.
Absolutely.
Where you can learn how to make that, and you'll make some drinks and people will be like, there's no alcohol, but trust me, you'll like it. And you can make up your own stuff there and kind of go with it too. So a lot of good stuff for sure. Gonna cut that there. But yeah, and then again, make sure to check out Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram page. But I think too, as we're running up on time, I know, are there like one or two cocktails that you might say might be great ones to have around the upcoming Christmas holiday? That might win over some folks, if people can dazzle with the skills and be able to share that when they get their holiday party together.
Absolutely. So I think, especially during this time, champagne and sparkling wine are kind of it's going to happen. People are going to bring these out. They're kind of special occasions. So like a French 75 is an absolutely stunning cocktail. It's light, it's refreshing. So it's gin, lemon juice, a little bit of simple syrup, and sparkling wine. So this is a great, to your point about food pairings, this is a great food cocktail. So if you're doing salads, it's going to work. If you're doing, cheeses, it's going to work. If you're doing a salad, anything that is kind of in that starter category, it's a great way to have a cocktail with it. And if you don't want a cocktail, you have a bottle of champagne. It's not going to go unnoticed, trust me. So French 75 is always a good one. And then depending on kind of what your focus is, like a good old fashioned is hard to beat. So like whiskey, a little bit of sweetener, and you can go a bunch of different ways. I think for the season, you use a little maple syrup instead of simple syrup. So you get that kind of flavor in there. And then you can experiment with the different bitters, depending on kind of if you're trying to do it with food or if you're trying to do it just as kind of on its own. So you can experiment with that as well. So like a chocolate bitters during the holidays is going to be pretty fantastic. So, you can go with maple syrup, you can reinforce it with a little chocolate and some Angostura bitters, which gives it that kind of spice notes, and some nice whiskey. Replace the maple syrup with like a porter, reduced porter syrup. Kind of add those beer elements in there. That would be really stunning. Like there's so many different directions you can go. Negronis, Manhattans, whiskey sours, and you can add, even if you just change up the garnish to be a little bit more seasonal, it really adds a lot of kind of wow factors. So like a simple sprig of rosemary and then dust it with some powdered sugar. So then it looks like a Christmas tree.
Oh, right? Okay, right,
so,
right.
Like, there's a lot of different little elements that you can add to add that seasonal touch, even on just a standard cocktail. So I could geek out on this for hours with you, but there are so many different ways, and I think it's just about being creative and being purposeful of kind of what you're trying to make, and most importantly, with anything alcohol related, is have fun, man. Just have a good time.
Definitely. Well, I know we're up on time here. We got to have you back on again so we can get into more stuff, because we could talk here for a good amount of time for sure, like you said. And I know there's a few of the other topics. We didn't really get into some of the mixology history and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, it was great having you on. Got to get you back. We're heading into New Year's. Another time to also make some great cocktails, beer cocktails, and all that kind of stuff. I was thinking something with the ham. Like, so if you have a ham for Christmas, I feel like something with a Pilsner in it might be something to kind of come together with it or so.
Man, but that honey baked ham, man, like you get that brown sugar in there, like you could tie some stuff into that. Like you can go porter with that, with ham, which sounds kind of weird, but it would work. But Pilsner, like you're the beer guy. I don't know.
I mean, I was thinking the Pilsner give us like a little bit of something to go off the ham, and I'm thinking with the ham with the pineapples on there and stuff like that too. But that brown sugar, now you got me thinking of like I'm a bigger drinker type guy. So now I'm thinking of some of the bourbon stouts and stuff, because we were talking about the old fashions and stuff. So you
can go Imperial IPA with that thing, man. You got that malty backbone, like or that, so many different ways. I'm gonna have to ask you, like, you're gonna be my beer guy. You're like, hey Ron, I got this thing, man. I'm making a barbecue, dude. Like, tell me what's up.
I feel like Montgomery Burns now on The Simpsons.
And I'll be your cocktail guy.
Right.
Like, hey Chris, man. I gotta make some cocktails, dude.
Let's do this and let's do this, right? Yeah, so put it all together. So no, it's been great. We'll definitely get you back on again. Keep us up to speed on the stuff you're doing there. Again, make sure to check out A Bar Above. Check out Chris on the stuff that he's doing. And then this is fun. So Thursday night, be back with the happy hour live stream. Always feel free to run by there, because that's when we have drinks, we laugh, we tell all kinds of different things. That's where it gets a little bit crazy. We put on a smile on people's faces before we head into the weekend. For those of you that will be listening to this on the podcast, I will have the notes and stuff down there as well. So you'll see all the stuff there for the Bar Above sites as well. But thank you again, my friend. If you want to hang tight, I'll go ahead and sign off here.
I got one more thing I got to ask, man. Real quick.
See,
and
people. It always goes longer. Just saying. Go ahead.
And I got to throw a little curveball here for you.
I'm free.
Okay, and it's going to be quick, I promise you, because my kids are going to like hammer on my door to
Your
make
kids are the ones that are going to be
chicken
hungry.
nuggets in a second, man. Dino nuggets are happening. So this is kind of personal for me, and as a content creator, I've done this for a long time, right? I've been doing this for probably 10 years at least, maybe 13 years, creating content. So for anybody that's watching this, please, the best thing that you can do is subscribe to his channel, or if you're on a podcast, leave a review, subscribe, show some love, because this is a lot of work that he's doing to put out these podcasts and this show. So honestly, please just subscribe, leave comments. You know the drill. Just do it. Just take the 30 seconds out of your life. And I promise you, for me as a content creator, it was the best part of my day. When I saw those comments and I saw people subscribing, it made all the difference. So that's all. Yeah. That's all I got.
No, I definitely appreciate that. I got to give big thanks to Lizzie as well that ended up putting us together. So she reached out to me about coming on, and I appreciate you coming on. I mean, you got some pretty, and if you don't know, Chris has some pretty good numbers behind him, like 30,000 YouTube, 30,000 Instagram, Facebook. I forgot the number was on Facebook. But yeah, so for you to take out time in your day to come on here, because I make ripples here and there, but you're making splashes. So I appreciate that on your end.
It's a fun conversation, man. In 2 years, it's gonna be like, oh, I know that guy. I saw him blow up. I'm this cocktail guy. You're like, dude, I don't know that guy.
Yeah. I don't know him. Lock the door. Right? Yeah.
But I appreciate you having me on, man. I really do. Definitely. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for coming on. Make sure to go ahead, check out A Bar Above, and I will look forward to catching all of you guys here on Thursday. That being said, we'll go ahead and get out of here. Y'all have a great Monday evening and see you in a few days. Cheers, everybody.